Good afternoon, Madam CS, and thank you for having this conversation with us today. I will start this conversation with a clarification about Kenya's mission in Somalia, its current position and AMISOM, and whether we still are following the withdrawal plans that had been announced earlier.
Well, welcome, Bernard. It's nice to see you at MOD today. Well, there's no clarification, really. Kenya happens to be one of the troop contributing countries to the African Union mission to Somalia, AMISOM. We went in under a UN Security Council resolution. We have remained engaged. But you'll also know that our engagement with Somalia came long before AMISOM, right at the point of the collapse of Somalia in 1991-92. We were engaged because we have a duty of care to our neighborhood. You will know a lot of engagements took place that led to the negotiation meetings and conferences that led to the birthing of the transitional administration and government. We escorted that government into Somalia, and we have been engaged even within long after AMISOM in contributing to creating the capacity of Somalia to protect itself and protect its neighbors, borders with its neighbors. So there is no clarification. We are part of that mission. We are bound by our responsibility to the international community to contribute. Our peace support operations are historical. This is one of 44 missions we have engaged in since independence. So really, it is part of that responsibility that we have continued to carry forward.
Does that mean that there is no withdrawal plan as yet?
Well, we are part of a multilateral effort. Yeah. We are bound by the plans within that framework. It is governed by the United Nations Security Council, which is driven by assessments that often carried out between the African Union and the UN Security Council. So that is what guides us. And there is obviously a plan. As you probably know, that there are intentions for exit. This exit is supposed to be based on changed circumstances on the ground, because people did not go to Somalia to walk about. There was a reason to go into Somalia. And so there is a condition-based framework of exit by AMISOM, and so we are part of that entire system.
What are those conditions?
Well, that there is security on the ground, that Al-Shabaab is defeated, and that there is a capacity, a local Somali capacity, to provide security for Somalia.
Based on the progress so far and the years that we've been engaged there, do you think we are heading anywhere towards achieving?
Mwinzi, we have come a long way. Mm-hmm. We have absolutely come a long way. Mm-hmm. If you are to speak about even the level of progress, today we are having state institutions functioning. Remember, when AMISOM went in, one of its first mandates was to protect a very nascent administration. We are having a fully fledged administration in Somalia. We have federal member states that are functioning. We have economy that has been running and improving, maybe slowly, but it is improving. So Al-Shabaab, which was the main reason for going in, has been seriously degraded. It is still a threat, so we have come a long, long way. But are we at a point where there is sufficient capacity to hold territory, to provide services, to do all the things that an effective military formation can do? Not yet, but the progress is there, and there's a lot of activity. Training is being done by a number of formations from the EU, from members of the TCC. When I served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we had a memorandum to help build civic capacity for administration, for tax collection, for management of borders, joint management of borders, and for administration. We offered our institutions to train capacity for healthcare provision and schools and things like that. So a lot of progress. Clearly, we are not where we were in 1993.
There has been talk about 2021 exit, no?
Of course, and that discussion has been held even at the highest level of the UN Security Council. But as you probably know, the Security Council, this is an agenda that remains on the table of the Security Council. And every so often, in fact, every 6 months, we invariably have Somalia, the status of Somalia being deliberated. So it's an evolving situation, and that is what is going to guide us.
Now, Kenya's continued stay, of course, has implications on budgetary allocations. There have been concerns about, for instance, how much money we are spending annually to keep boots on the ground in Somalia. How much of that is split between Kenya and the other supporting partners, including the EU and the UNSC?
There is no expense you can equate to the defense and security of a nation. You know, because if you don't have security, you don't have a nation. So there is no cost to the provision of security, okay? Having said that, though, we are part of a United Nations Security Council mandated force in Somalia. This force is funded by a number of multilateral kitties, you know, the largest one being the EU funding through the African Union Peace Fund. Of course, there is also support. We have supported our troops through provision of force multipliers, which has been a sticky issue with the UN Security Council, because to date, AMISOM still remains a land-based force. It does not have force multipliers, doesn't have air asset, does not have a naval asset. But we know that these assets are critical to the functioning and the success of any mission. We would not have taken Kismayo in 2012 without the naval capability and the air cover. And so we have continued to provide for air cover. We have continued to use our naval assets to supply, you know, because it is very important. A lot of the supply lines are mined, as you probably know. And so we have to do responsible activity in support of our troops on the ground. And that is how we utilize our assets. So we are not paying for the operations, but we do the support, which is usual, because even if it was in peacetime, we'll still have to train. We'd still have to keep a level of readiness. So a lot of what is assumed to be expenses on the exchequer, frankly, is taken up by the multilateral resources.
All right. Maybe then we can move to the ongoing trade negotiations between Kenya and the US.
Well, I think you should ask MFA.
No. The question is whether there are any military negotiations going on, whether it's
these negotiations have only just begun.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, the US has been a key partner of Kenya as far as defense and security matters are concerned. From where I sit in MOD, I would hope that as these discussions evolve, they will be comprehensive and that they will also include aspects of defense and security.
Mm-hmm. So you're not.
But it is quite premature to speak about the content now.
Whether there is a military component, for instance.
We just launched the negotiations.
There have been questions about, for instance, drone capability, deploying drones on Kenyan space and such stuff.
Well,
by the US.
You know, I think that has been part of the media excitement. You know, I had it from you people. I don't know where you got it from, and really, it's not something that I would be happy to comment on, because I'm not aware of any such capabilities and negotiations. But as far as the trade agreement is concerned, having come from MFA and having actually negotiated the bilateral strategic dialogue, which is the basis of that FTA negotiation, we were looking at evolving a strategic relationship that is comprehensive and diversified, that would open Kenya as a gateway, because we are a gateway into East Africa, into the African region, particularly within the context of the CFTA. You know, so we hope that these negotiations will take that character, But negotiations, as you know, are two parties. They have just been launched. And but that notwithstanding, the relationship between Kenya and the USA as far as defense and security is concerned has remained robust, and it's our intention to keep it so.
All right. Speaking of Al-Shabaab, for a very long time, such incursions have remained Kenya's biggest security risk. Does that still obtain today? Do we still view Al-Shabaab as Kenya's biggest external threat, or is there another threat that we don't know about?
Well, there is no doubt that Al-Shabaab is a very significant threat to us. And the reason that is the case is because Al-Shabaab is not just a localized band. Al-Shabaab is part of a global network of terrorist activity, intentions, and agenda. And what we have seen is that terrorism has a way of creating a global web. You know that they have pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. Part of them have pledged allegiance to ISIS. We know there is a link between them and Boko Haram. We see their footprint going down south all the way to Mozambique and maybe further on. We have seen appetite into Eastern Congo. Therefore, it is not just a small band. It is a network of global intent to impact and change or appropriate the ways of life and afflict the values that we consider primary values to us as a democratic country and people. And so this is a threat, not just to Kenya, not just to the Horn of Africa, but globally because of its character of the global networks. But other than Al-Shabaab, of course, there are many other evolving threats, particularly today. One of the big threats is linked to the question of climatic volatility, and what you are increasingly beginning to see as the climate crisis, The volatility, the ecological volatility that we are seeing pushes us, particularly in our own geographic region, which is fragile ecologically, which has been prone to famines, to drought, cyclic droughts, which has seen forced migration because of natural factors. Now, all these things, when they come together, they put a lot of pressure on the state, to deliver even on social services. They put a lot of pressure on the communities to realize their full potential. And that has a way of impacting on the state security and stability, and therefore on its capacity to be productive. So the climatic issue, fragility, is a big threat that has direct implications. And that is why at MOD we take very seriously the environmental programs. We are probably the single actor in this country that is leading in terms of the environmental soldier program. And if you see everywhere, everything we do, we end up doing a green act. It's a very important thing to us because we believe that we must answer to the call of His Excellency and Commander-in-Chief to increase our forest cover at least to 10%. That we must push towards green and blue economy. And that is why we led in the initiation of the high-level conference on the blue economy, so that we can begin to drive a sustainable economy, which is very important. And the creation of the Coast Guard is part of this. The creation of the entire, evolving the policy on maritime security, maritime economy, and things like that is part of that bigger issue around creating a sustainable economy that will reduce the fragility and ecological crisis that we are beginning to face, and that is becoming clearly evident to everybody.
In small, and it's good that you're talking about the issues, conflicts that are brought about by climate change. But in the small communities we live in, that is displayed by, communities rising against communities.
Correct.
But when you put it at the national level and then at the larger international level, are we likely to see this resource race, for instance, up in the north in Turkana, conflict for resources between Kenya and Ethiopia, Kenya and Sudan, the maritime territories as well?
Well, I mean, as you say, within the localized area, the resource-based clashes have become cyclic in our country. And that is why there is a lot of effort in terms of developing the drier parts of this country, in terms of opening up infrastructure, in terms of urging diversification of the economy, in terms of improving the economy and even the productive systems. For example, if you are dependent on livestock, how do you create a value system, a value system from the point of production to the point of marketing? And this is why, part of the reasons why we have been tasked with turning around the KMC, so that you can create a ready market for the livestock market, because this is a strategic asset. You know, it's a strategic asset, and it links very directly to reducing the conflicts that we are seeing, you know, and therefore creating stability and more productivity, you know. So,
but the counter argument will be that that red market has always been there. For instance, KMC has been in operation for this long. It has always been getting animals from local Kenyan farmers.
Correct.
Are we seeing the introduction or growth of capacity, for instance? What is going to change now that is going to benefit the farmers somewhere in Samburu?
What is going to change is that we are going to create a quantum. We're going to create a quantum. Right now, we are at a point where the KMC is incapable of reaching its potential of, say, processing up to 3,000 animals a day. That, we believe, is a facility that should do that. And if you did that, then you create a chain that is of assured marketing. And that is also subject to the kind of management and governance systems you put in place. You know, so it's a whole, we are looking at a whole system, turning a whole system, not for the sake of KMC, but because it is speaking to the production chain that is going to stabilize and that is going to improve the productivity of this nation. This is our business.
Should Kenyans, for instance, I don't know whether you have timelines, but what should Kenyans hope or expect to see coming out of KMC in the next few months?
Well, listen, Kenyans should expect that KMC is going to work. That is my commitment to Kenyans. And the reason I say that is because there is evidence. Well, you know, facts don't lie. You know, there is evidence. We have a capacity to turn it around. We have a capacity to contribute to the productivity of this nation. We have a capacity to rehabilitate. And we have done that to a number of infrastructure, critical infrastructure. And we, in our mind, KMC is one of those critical infrastructures that must turn around.
Mm-hmm. As it stands now, do you think it will require a lot of capital injection? And if so?
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
Okay. And that brings us to the issue of this perceived militarization of the government.
Well, another cliche that really doesn't have any meaning, frankly. If anybody was careful to look at the Constitution and to look at the tasking of the MOD by the Constitution, you will discover that we have three core areas of operation. One, we defend and protect this nation and its people from external aggression and threats. Secondly, we respond to any emergency that affects this country. And that is why when there is a landslide, when a bridge breaks, when there is a ship or a vessel capsizes, when there is a fire in the Tsavo, you know, I don't hear anybody talking about the fire in the Tsavo, incidentally.
We were in the Tsavo.
Incidentally, this doesn't seem to be news, okay? But that's besides the point. So I am saying it's a range of areas. It's not one area that we are called upon. That is the second core business that we do. The third one is that if there is a threat to the stability of this nation, either whether there is, maybe a little bit of crisis that the police is dealing with, we can, with the authorization of Parliament, support efforts to restore peace and stability, because we are supposed to create an enabling environment for productivity for this country. Now, once you read that, then it becomes obvious that there is nothing that can be seen as out of context if we are engaged in any activity that responds to these three areas of tasking by the Constitution.
What would you say is the crisis that we face now that warrants the deployment, not in that mass scale, but the deployment of military in key government positions?
Well, there is no crisis.
Have been in civilian
there is no crisis. I think you should ask that question differently. Yeah. What does the military or MOD have to provide? And by the way, it's not just the military. Yes. We had deployed a civilian staff to start up the Kenya Space Agency. So, so people are just focusing on little things. We have civilian and we have uniformed officers in this ministry. So we don't just deploy uniformed people. We deploy competencies. That's what we do. And that is what we are good at, because in the MOD, particularly in the uniform side, we have an array of high caliber international standard capabilities. That is why we could, within 3 months, rehabilitate the Thika-Nanyuki Railroad. That is why we are rehabilitating the Nakuru-Kisumu Road, and I can tell you it will happen within time. That is why we have been able to rehabilitate the Kisumu port. Today, MV Uhuru is shipping millions of tons of goods into Port Bell since December of 2019. So what we are deploying is not military. We are deploying competencies of Kenyans that are loyal to this country, that are committed to this country, and that are proud to contribute in guaranteeing the right environment of production for Kenyans.
Okay. There was talk of setting up a Nairobi Metropolitan Force to complement National Police Service functions.
Well, I don't know about police force. We don't do police forces. We do defense forces. We don't do police forces. But listen, Bernard, I just reflect back. Major General Badi has been assisting in the provision of 4 key services to the city of Nairobi since his redeployment there. I want you to reflect back. Since that time, and even in the context of COVID, we have singularly, General Badi has been able to provide close to 200 boreholes of water, is at the point of rehabilitating over 80 hospitals in this city, has done tens of kilometers of road, has cleaned up this city, I'm sure you have seen that, has given us parks in this city, things that people never thought could happen. In other words, we are deploying competencies that turn things around. And when you listen to Kenyans, they are saying, can you come to other cities? Are we true? Can you come to other cities? That's not the point. Nairobi and its metropole happen to contribute to this country almost 6% of our GDP. Nairobi is the only global capital, UN global capital, in the global south, the only one. So it is important globally. Nairobi happens to be the capital city, both administrative, legislative, it's legislative, judicial city of this country. So by all measure, this is a city that should work. But it is also a regional hub in terms of travel, a regional hub in terms of digital media. I mean, I have had people saying, I'm reporting on a country in North Africa from Nairobi. I've had things like that. How that happens, I'm not sure. But, but maybe it just tells you what Nairobi represents for the world, not just for ourselves. Now, the provision of these services has done something. It's interesting to look at the statistics and the reduction of cases. For example, we're talking with the doctor that has been responsible for infectious diseases such as cholera. She says they have not had a cholera patient in the last couple of months. That has to link with the services that are being provided, especially provisions of water, good public health systems, therefore hospitals and things like that. So really, as I've said, we are deploying competencies and they are turning things around. And what we hear from the citizens is gratitude. Gratitude. And we are hoping that in doing so, because even Major General Badi is not working alone, he's working with the officers that have been in the Nairobi city administration. And so we hope part of these competencies can also be transferable, because it is important that this excellence also permeates other parts of this this
That
society.
actually preempts the question that I wanted to ask. Now, if we have core competencies that are, domiciled in one place, isn't there a risk then of that one place colonizing the other places where those competencies are not? And to avert that risk, is there any program, or do we see a situation where those core competencies could be transferred to other areas?
All the time we do that. All the time. You will know that when you are working on the Thika Nanyuki Railroad, the KDF officers were working with a range of actors from other agencies. NYS, we had people from Kenya Railways, we had people from the national administration, and that has become actually the modus operandi. A lot of these things are being done by teams, very diverse teams that are drawn from across the government, depending again on competencies. This is very important. But the second thing that we have to offer is the ability to have a modality of work that is driven by discipline. It is very important that you have a task and you execute that task within the given time and within the allocated resources. It is that discipline that this ministry has been able to keep. And that is something that can be replicated. And we know that there are pockets of excellence across this entire government. So it's not about colonizing. I mean, I don't know that a Kenyan institution, one can colonize another one. I think it's a terrible way to describe the utilization, optimization of competencies for the benefit of society. The railroad or the port is not being used by KDF. It is being used by Kenyans, for productive activities that are benefiting Kenyans. So I think it is important that we pat the backs of these committed Kenyans that are working for this nation.
That sounds like a valid argument. Let's shift gears then and talk about the welfare of Kenya's troops, both on the front lines and those that are based here. If you go to the War Memorial Hospital, you'll find a lot of them who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorders. Is this ministry doing anything to address the health issues of our frontline soldiers? And if so, in what ways? What kinds of support are the soldiers getting? Well,
first of all, let me just say that post-traumatic stress disorder is not a military problem. It is a societal problem. And frankly, as a Kenyan, I think it is safe to flag this as a problem. And you just have to look around to see whether you're talking about the levels of domestic violence or violence against young people or all sorts of things. And it manifests, or the number of homicides and suicides and murders and all sorts of things. So there is stress. There's no doubt. It is not an MOD preserve, so to speak. But having said that,
when you talk about, because I think that needs clarification, when you talk about the suicides, for instance, and the homicides and all these at the domestic, most of them are actually not linked to post-traumatic stress disorders. They are linked to other psychological issues.
Well,
depression.
Okay, that is fine. But I'm saying the question of stress and the sum total of the context that produces post-traumatic stress disorder is not a military preserve. I think there is a bigger societal challenge that we need to look at as a whole. And I think the statistics out of the Crime Research Center will tell you this. But having said that, it is also true that across the world, uniformed forces, disciplined forces, tend to suffer a higher rate of post-traumatic stress disorder because of the context of operation. Clearly, the environment of operation for uniformed officers is very different from a civilian operation. It even gets more complex if you're talking about a situation as we are in terms of Al-Shabaab, in terms of Somali deployment and things like that. And because of that, as part of the military architecture, management of post-traumatic stress disorder is central to what we do. It is central to what we do. It is not just about the soldier, it's about the soldier and the family, and so we take this very seriously. And that is why, as part of that structure, we have fully fledged chaplaincies in the MOD as part of the structure. This has nothing to do with Somalia or anything else. It is part of creating the wholeness, the readiness of the troops at any one time. But coming to Somalia, since we went into Somalia, and because of the effect of that engagement, we have even expanded that program. We have a fully fledged, not just units of dealing with debriefing both before and after deployment. But now we have a fully fledged wellness center that has been, we're just about to finish with it. And in fact, the former CDF is well acclaimed for having been at the forefront of expanding that wellness program. So we are very engaged with this because we understand the value of having top-notch readiness in our soldiers, in our servicemen and women. And so we take very seriously their well-being. It's a very important component of the core preparedness for the execution of the mandate that we must, that is provided to us.
In the same regard, how have the barracks handled the COVID-19 situation in the country?
Very well. Actually, I am very proud. It has been very well. We were able to take very comprehensive measures from very earlier on. We have continued to do so, and I would hope that you have seen that even coming through here. Many of us have to, we undertake repeated testing often. So it is something that we are taking very, very seriously. And we've had tests across all our units. We stood a complete unit of isolation, which has been functioning. Thankfully, it has not had a lot of guests. We are very pleased about that. And I think the test of how well we've done is that we never stopped any of our training sessions. We just came back from the passing out parade of the young recruits, the entire cohort, very good training. They went through it. All our institutions have been running, but they've been running under very strict observance of the MOH protocols, and our medical has been very, very, very engaged. So from where I sit as the cabinet secretary, I can only feel pride. They have done very well, and we hope we can continue.
Have the same guidelines and the same protocols been deployed to our soldiers in Somalia?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do they engage in this protocol? How do they observe them, for instance?
Exactly the way they're supposed to. They keep the distance. They make sure that they keep the social distance. They are sanitized. They observe all the protocols that we observe here. And that is not just there. Even in our camps here, they are observed strictly. Yeah.
Still on welfare, before as we come to the end of this, we are preparing for the marking of KDF Day.
Indeed.
Later this month.
Indeed.
What should we expect to see from this ministry in terms of outreach programs?
Well, our outreach programs have been growing. They have been growing. If I make reference to the COVID-19 situation, the number of activities that we've done in terms of fumigating, even informal settlements. Yesterday, I sat a large part of the day with the principals and board members of the KDF-sponsored schools, 13 secondary schools and 15 primary schools. We are all ready, and a lot of work has gone into preparing, creating the right environment, physical environment, getting the teachers ready, to receive the kids. But even during this time, we have done much more beyond COVID. We've continued to provide for services such as drilling of boreholes, and I've seen a lot of drilling, a lot of drilling going on, because we've made the linkage between public health and the prevention of COVID infections. We created that linkage. So you will continue to see these types of things across the entire country, and the demands are growing from everywhere, frankly.
What's the theme for this year's celebrations?
It's actually the civic, the humanitarian civic
assistance?
Support. Civic support. So it's really the military-civilian relations in terms of supporting services and extending ourselves beyond our core mandate in order to provide services to the community.
And finally, just a small segment of what is in the news currently. There are conversations about the abducted Cuban doctors, whom I interviewed in Mandera a few months ago. There was all this conflicting news yesterday about whether they have been released or not. I've engaged with the elders, the Kenyan elders who crossed over into Somalia to negotiate their release. And they said that the abductors said they will only engage with the Kenyan government. The Kenyan government, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, says it will not negotiate with terrorists. What's the position of this ministry as far as the Cuban doctors?
Well, there is no position of the ministry. It's a position of the Kenyan government. First of all, and I've said this before, we abhor the fact that anyone could abduct healthcare providers. Even in a situation of war, international law provides for the protection of healthcare providers, and that includes doctors. It provides for the protection of certain other critical infrastructure like schools, like hospitals. And so the position of this government is that we condemn in the strongest terms that anybody could abduct doctors and take them into as hostages. So that's the first point. That it is terrorists that have done this, I think goes to reflect the intention of this network of people. They do not respect rights. They do not respect the services provided to the population by these doctors. And therefore, and our policy as a government has been that we would not negotiate with the terrorists, not just on the question of the medical doctors, on any other matters, because we are diametrically opposed in terms of the orientation of what their objectives are and how they seek to pursue those objectives. That position has not changed. Now, on the release of the doctors, again, this is something that I saw in the media. I don't know where they got it from, and so I would be hesitant to comment on it. When this happens, I'm sure it will be done in a manner that is consistent with international practice. So I am not aware of any release.
What kind of role is Kenya playing in securing their release?
In the kind of situation that we are talking about, I don't think we would be able to give you that information. No.
Should we expect their release anytime soon?
We are hopeful that we'll get them out, and it is our desire that we'll get them back safely.
Since the abduction, what kind of engagements have we had, either with the Somali government or with the Cuban government?
Well, again, as this is an operational matter, I would not divulge any details of it. Suffice to say, as a country that condemns in the strongest terms any terrorist activity, we condemn this activity. The Cuban doctors were in Kenya under the understanding between Kenya and Cuba. They were not in the territory outside of Kenya. And so this was really a provocation. It was really a provocative act by whomsoever did it. We know there was claim that the Al-Shabaab is responsible. But a lot of work is going on in the hope, and we believe that this will happen, that they can be released, and that this can happen in safety.
Finally, what proof do we have that they are alive?
This is not a question I can answer on camera.
All right, then. On that note, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much,
Yes, I
Bernard.
really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.